Welcome to the Brains on Brains podcast, brought to you by ECNP, where early career scientists speak with the most interesting experts in applied and translational neuroscience.
Hi everyone, my name is Michele De Prisco, and I will be today's host of the ECNP podcast, a great initiative by the ECNP designed to inspire, inform, and share personal experience in neuroscience research. Hosting this episode is a double honor for me. First, because I have with me Professor Eduard Vieta, one of the most influential figures in modern psychiatry and a leading authority on bipolar disorder. Professor Vieta is director of both the Bipolar Depressive Disorder Unit and the Department of Psychology and Psychiatry at the Hospital Clinic of Barcelona, and associate professor of psychiatry at the University of Barcelona. He has authored more than 1,000 research papers spanning clinical, pharmacological, genetic, digital, and neuroimaging approaches. And second, because I had the privilege of meeting Professor Vieta about 4 years ago during my research stay in Barcelona, and joining his group a year later has been one of the greatest opportunities in my professional life. Edward, it's a real pleasure to have you with us. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you very much, Michele, for inviting me.
Today we'll be talking about what it means to be a leader in modern neuroscience. But before we get to leadership, I think it's important to look at where it all begins. How did your interest in psychiatry and research first start?
Well, if I think of it, it started when reading books from my father's library. My father and my mother were very good readers, people who had a lot of books. And I had the opportunity to read books from philosophers like Bertrand Russell or psychiatrists like Sigmund Freud or, all kind of topics around, human science, evolution, anthropology, philosophy, psychology, all of those sciences around the human being, the human brain indirectly, right? And that was pushed me into psychiatry. And this is why from the start, I decided to study medicine with the final aim of becoming a psychiatrist.
Oh, nice. And in 2001, you started the bipolar disorders program at the Hospital Clinic of Barcelona with the goal of researching and applying knowledge about the causes, courses, prognosis, treatment, and prevention of bipolar disorder. Did you ever imagine that 25 years later, we will still be here talking about this group? And in this time, as neuroscience itself changed so much, what has allowed the group to remain so relevant, in your opinion?
Well, I never anticipated anything, actually, in general and around my professional career. I never thought I would do the career I did, and I would lead the program I lead, and things would go as they went. I would say they went pretty well, in part because I love my profession, in part because I really worked very hard as well. But no, I never anticipated that. I'm very happy and privileged to have been witnessing the progress of neuroscience. And I must say that the reason why I didn't study psychology and went to psychiatry instead was basically because at the time that I had to decide which career to pursue, I realized that psychology at that time, at least in Barcelona, was not grounded on neuroscience. It was totally grounded on philosophy in a way that was totally scientific. So it was interesting, but it was not scientific. And I was totally convinced that the only way to understand the brain and to understand human behavior was through neuroscience. And that's why I say that I'm so happy that through this process and through these years, I have witnessed the progress of neuroscience as applied to human behavior and to the brain, and the science of the brain has become the science of human behavior and mental illnesses.
Yeah, it's very interesting reading about this sliding door in your life. That it will be interesting what happened in case you have chosen, for example, psychology. But I took a look at your CV and I saw that you received so many awards over the years. And Well, I believe that each award and recognition is important, but is there one award that is particularly close to your heart, perhaps because of what it represented or because the story behind?
Yeah, I think, let me say that I think awards are very important because they recognize effort and, and success. And it's generous, and it's a way to recognize people who have done, a great effort for the advancement of human well-being and so on. And if I had to choose one, I would probably choose the first international award, which was the Mogensco Award, which is named after a great clinician and investigator, Mogensco, who was a pioneer in the area of testing novel treatments, particularly, obviously, lithium. That's a one that is close to my heart, but also the ones that have come from the people who are closer to me, because at the end, what you really appreciate is uh, the appreciation of your peers and the people who are closer to you. That is more important than any institution or other thing. And let me say that now I'm in a privileged position because I'm the chair of the ECNP award committee. So I'm doing something even better than receiving awards, which is so.
Okay. Okay.
Of course, along with the other committee members who are renowned scientists and so on, it's very nice to be able to provide people with recognition that they deserve because of hard work and innovation and so on.
Yeah, and it's good to hear that, like, the award, it's not important the award itself, but all the thing that actually it represents, so the effect, the people, the respect of people that actually are giving the award. And
Yeah, and also the fact that the award might come with your name, but it reflects the effort of a group, because
okay.
at the end of the day, it might be your name because you are maybe the head or the responsible for the group, but at the end, it is also rewarding the work of a lot of people who are behind the scene, young people who are doing their own career, and it is very important to acknowledge the effort of the team behind the person who is leading the team.
Okay, thank you. And another thing that I read in your curriculum is that in addition to being the director of the bipolar depressive disorder unit, the Department of Psychiatry, you also served as director of CIBERSAM, which is one of the most important research centers in Spain, from 2016 to 2023, and now you co-lead the Brain Disorders Translational Research Program at EDPABS. I mean, leading institutions of that scale must come with both opportunities and challenges. And what did you learn from these experiences, from these leadership experiences, and how have they shaped your way to approach to science and teamwork?
Well, I was lucky that initially I didn't feel I had leadership, conditions, or it's something that happened over time. After accepting some responsibilities, first with a small group. I remember when we were just initially 3 people and then 7, in the group. And then at some point, leading the Cybersam, for example, with more than 500 investigators, it is a different scale, right? With a small group, you just lead by model. You just work hard and expect others to work hard because they are your peers. When you lead a big institution, it is a bit more difficult to lead in a hand by hand or close relationship, but you still need, I think, to communicate some sort of values, because values is what keep people together. And one important value is generosity. One important value is fairness. One important value is helping the people who are most needed and promoting the early career people and so on. So as far as you can show some of these values and have the moral authority to say, I apply these values to my life, so I hope to apply these values to this context or to this institution, then at some point you may be successful. You also need, of course, to to learn a little bit about management and numbers and Excel and other things. There's the technical part, but the most difficult part is not the technical part, is the decision making and the strategic part. And this is a learning process. Nobody is born knowing that. You get the experience and you make mistakes and then you learn over those.
Okay. Yeah, because I was also curious about the soft skills that you're actually required to lead all these people and all this stuff, and understand that these skills are not something that you grow up, well, you born with, but you grow up with, it seems.
Yeah, I think there are things that, maybe more or less natural. People may be more introverted,
Okay.
more extroverted, more dominant, less dominant. There are things. I was born in a family where my father was a businessman. He built his own company. He was the man who brought high fidelity for music listening.
Oh,
Yeah,
nice.
to Spain, and he built. At that time, it was the most successful company on this kind of industry, and the loudspeakers were famous because they were really the best at that time in Europe. And maybe there is something from that, but the other aspects have to do, again, basically with you know doing what you do for you and trying to do that for the others as well, and choosing also, if you can, the right people around you, because the people you surrounds you not only speaks about you, it also modulates the way you lead. And I think leadership has to be by peers, by not by authority, but by convincing people and by sharing decisions. But it is true that some point, from time to time, authority is necessary. But this is very seldom. You need to
Okay.
have the ability at some point to uh, decide by yourself, or to sometimes make a difficult decision with somebody with a bad decision in the group. But this is very seldom. Most commonly, it's a matter of speaking, discussing, negotiating, and listening very often to your peers and to the people who work with you.
Yeah, I would like to link to the things that you were saying, because about like making decisions, because I understand that being the head of a group means making decisions. Sometimes making a decision means taking a risk, and in our field that might mean choosing to invest in one research line over another, or believing in one profile over the other. And did you, is there like any kind of decision or any moment when you looked back and said, okay, I did like a bad decision. I would have liked to choose the thing differently.
Very often, you don't know if the decision was right or wrong, because the decisions, it's a. I like sometimes Eric Romer's films and some novels where people can actually write or imagine different pathways, right? As if you could go back to the past and then look at what would have happened if you decided otherwise. Uh, I think I was lucky because, let me just be a bit candid. Two of the main decisions that one can take in life, I think I didn't make a mistake. And one was choosing a partner to build a family, and the other one was choosing a profession to build a professional life. And if you're lucky with these two, and of course there are many alternatives to that, and there are many different models of partnership. But the most important things in life, I think, have to do with doing or making those decisions. So yes, I made mistakes in the past. One mistake I do a lot is to say yes too often to many things. I'm not sure I recommend doing otherwise. Sometimes saying yes to something that looked not so interesting just because of friendship or, just sort of trying, ended up being positive. sometimes I must acknowledge that it was not a great idea to do something that I was not totally convinced to do. But at the end of the day, it's part of our work, right? We say yes to things that sometimes are not remunerated, do not have a big impact. But there is this concept of the black swan, that means that sometimes you do something that you thought wouldn't fly. And at the end of the day, it becomes, and this has happened also with research. Sometimes you write a paper that you think this is going to have a big impact and nothing happens. And then a paper that you didn't think it would be relevant ends up being important. So that's part of the beauty of life, right?
No, nice. I see that you put a lot of values into your family, your partner, your parents, and so I believe that, for example, they have shaped. Well, you said that they shaped actually the way into you developed as a researcher. But speaking more about like research mentors, research supervisors, how they have influenced your way of doing research?
Yes, I think they've been influential in a way that, especially for research, has influenced very much my work. And one was the research director of my hospital, the hospital I work, the hospital clinic in Barcelona, who was Joan Rodés. He was an hepatologist, and he was the man who actually uh, took the hospital into the research arena and decided that research was part, an important or capital part of the work we do, not only taking care of patients,
Okay.
but also generating knowledge and disseminating knowledge through education. And this paradigm was very influential to me because at that time in psychiatry, there was not such atmosphere or not such environment. It is true that the department was still a very good department, but the fact that we had to, do research and innovation and education has been very much influenced by this man. I was also very influenced by a neurologist who is still now he's emeritus professor, but I learned a lot from him. So and this is Francesc Graus. So as you can see, I'm not mentioning psychiatrists at this point, but and then also a pharmacologist, Roswell Desarini, with whom I spent a year in Harvard and in Boston and McLean, was very influential. But of course, I must also mention some psychiatrists. One was Julio Vallejo in Spain, who was very influential, although he was not very fluent in English, so his influence didn't uh, go much beyond the frontiers of Spain. And many others that have been important in my career and that I would not name for succinctity. But I think we always have mentors and people who have influenced us, although it is important not to follow blindly any mentor. All mentors, of course, including ourselves, have their particularities and you don't need to follow everything they do.
Yeah, I totally agree with this. It's like to take a mentor from what they actually teach you and then like reshape and rephrase all these things to make it yours. So you went for being mentored to actually mentoring a lot of people, but I always like I'm curious with people that are like head of a department, head of a group, because we all rely on having someone we can go to when we need it. But what happens when you're that person, when you are in need to some advice, to some, I don't know, issue, problem?
Well, this is the beauty of having friends, Uh, sometimes friends do not need to know the details or the environment where your problem is taking place to give good advice. And also, I have friends who, even though they might not be a part of the close relationship in professional relationship, they might also be physicians or psychiatrists who may also give advice on specific matters, and researchers and other people. At the end of the day, if you are active in many surroundings, you end up being influenced by many good people. One example, for example, is ECNP. I've been part of the ECNP since ages, and I've been active part of the executive committee for many years. In fact, more than I should have been in terms of norms, but by the fact that I accepted the role of editor-in-chief of the journal European Neuropsychopharmacology, at some point I I had to stay longer in the executive committee.
Okay.
And I've been surrounded by extremely good people there. So it's at the end of the day, you get advice from many other sources, friends, family. My wife is obviously very important, but also colleagues and people that they're honest and share your values, and then can give you perfect advice.
Okay. And I'm also interested about the thing that you said, that is the leadership in the ECNP, European Neuropsychopharmacology. You are the editor-in-chief. And I'm wondering how different it is to lead a journal compared to lead a research group.
Well, yeah, of course, there are details that are unique of editorialship. You need to know the field. I learned a lot from other areas that I was not so knowledgeable by leading this journal, and of course having the help of the editorial board and editorial group with my junior editors and field editors. You learn a lot by reading so many papers, every month. But there are values that are universal. For example, you need to make decisions. And this is an area where you have to be very fast, understand that sometimes you might be a bit unfair. But it's part of life. You may be unlucky if you send a paper to us or to any other journal, and that week there were 3 very important papers that came along with yours.
Mhm.
You might be unlucky, and your paper might be desk rejected just because we don't accommodate so many papers at once, right? So
Okay.
it's just an example of how unfair sometimes this job can be. But what I try to do it is the way that scientific quality and speed of processing speed is the leading value of the journal. And if you do that, at the end of the day, there are exceptions, but most of the best papers that you get published in the journal and get published right on time, which is what I want to do.
Okay, thank you. I would like now to move on an area which is like putting to your attention like a feeling that many early career scientists and scientists in general feel, which is the imposter syndrome, imposter phenomenon. We had also a talk at the ECNP in Amsterdam last year about this, and there were a lot of people following this up. And I was wondering, have you ever felt like an imposter yourself? And what advice would you give to those who struggle to feel deserving of their achievement?
Yes, the imposter syndrome is the other face of the coin of something that is even worse, which is the people who are imposters and don't know it. So I think the imposter syndrome is part of the learning process. And I think most people, if they are a bit humble and slightly introverted and able to raise some self-criticism to what they do, may have gone through this sort of feeling at some point in their career. But it's something that can be cured by, doing the right thing all the time and learning that things can be done properly and that you can be good at what you do. For example, I don't think there is imposter syndrome in professional tennis, right? The number one in the ranking is the one who is the number one. There is no question about it. And that is because that is very easy to quantify, right? But if you know that you know what you talk about or what you do, you quickly get rid of the imposter syndrome. So imposter syndrome is something that is good to have at some point when you're very young. But is what is most important is not to fall into the other side of the coin.
Okay. Okay. So better embrace the imposter syndrome to actually say, okay, let's see how to do things properly, to do things right, than being the imposter ourselves.
Yeah, being the imposter means that some people at some point do not learn more, do not make any extra effort, and at the end of the day, they still believe they are the best, and they are not.
So just like a drive to actually keep us improving and say, okay, we still have like a gap between where we are and where we want to stay. Okay. And so what advice would you give to a young researcher who is starting to lead a group for the first time or is wanting to lead a group for the first time?
Yeah, this is a very big hurdle when you do your PhD and at some point you're supposed to lead your own group and to raise your own funding and to, it's a big gap, and many people, many good careers are lost at that point. It really depends on the ecosystem. Some ecosystems are fragile. I grew up in an ecosystem that was fragile in Spain, but obviously there are many others that are even worse. It was fragile because the funding was coming and going, and some years was very little, other years there was more. There was no a strong network of centers and funding, and that was difficult. And I'm sure many people struggle with that in countries where there is no strong tradition of research. Spain has progressed a lot, and now I cannot complain so much as probably many of my peers, but it is very difficult. And it's also difficult because it comes at one time when you are also normally or frequently building your own family and having to pay a mortgage or loan, and also, may have children and you want to take care of your children, and so many things come along together. And it's highly competitive. But it has to be honest. I think it has to be. Science is like a competitive or professional sport. It is competitive. And only the best can make it. And to be one of the best who can make it, there has to be an ecosystem that is fair, that is not discriminating, that gives opportunity to young people. That is not always the case. But in that condition, it has to be competitive, because the good research is the one that it doesn't need to yield results immediately, but is the one that ends up yielding results that are important for society. It's not a way of living. It's not something you do because you just like it without having to respond to the society that gave you the funding, right? And of course, there is the innovation, which is another way of doing research that can bring effective income to the leader. And that's another matter, because then you end up being some sort of entrepreneur or businessman at some point if you're lucky, right? But for research, in many cases, you need an ecosystem and you need to work a lot, be competitive, and some careers are lost in the way.
Okay. Thank you for sharing. The next question is one that I always enjoy asking because the answers are often personal and unexpected. Maybe you already provided a bit of answers like this, but I would like to be specific. Like, if you had a name of one person, whether a researcher, writer, musician, philosopher, artist, friend, whatever, who has had a meaningful influence on your career or the way you think, who would it be and why?
Yeah, I think I anticipated the answer, because the immediate answer would be Sigmund Freud, because he was the man who brought me into the field. But behind him, it was, I mentioned, my father. One thing, that Sigmund Freud was a very smart man. Of course, 99% of what he postulated and defined is not useful anymore, at least in science. So that's important, but it has a very important heuristic value. And one thing he said that I think is very important for life. He said, I was very lucky. Nothing was easy for me. And I like this sentence because it speaks about resilience, and it speaks about how good it is that you learn over life. You have the opportunity to learn over mistakes and over problems, and then become more resilient. I think it's an important lesson. Of course, there are people who are unlucky and get traumatized because they have bad luck. Simply, they are maltreated, or they won't go through a terrible situation and so on. But being able to recover and overcome problems and overcome difficulties, and hopefully if they are not too big to be overcome, it is a good way to then appreciate the beauty of life and the beauty of your profession, and spending the time on the things that you really like. And that's a privilege that you can actually earn if you make your effort in that direction. So that's important to be able, if you can, to make efforts in the direction that you really want to go, and to enjoy the way, not only enjoy the journey, not only look for an outcome that could be a promotion or making money. I think this is people overvalue those things, overrate money, overrate promotion. What really matters is to enjoy the way, and that the way is the journey is really profitable in terms of values, learnings, and helping others.
Okay, so living the present and to build the future, but also to actually live the present. Thank you. Well, we are moving to the conclusion of this episode. And today we talked about what does it mean to be a leader in modern neuroscience. And listening to the ECNP podcast, I remember that there is like one episode, maybe the first episode of the ECNP podcast, in which Professor David Nutt was interviewed, and he said, "The greatest thing in the world is to discover something new." I want to ask you, do you agree with this question? And maybe, or would you say that in leadership, the greatest thing might be helping others discover?
Yeah, I really like David a lot. David Nutt is one of the most prominent minds in modern neuroscience as applied to clinical practice, and his work on addiction has been groundbreaking. But I wouldn't agree with his sentence, actually. For me, the most important thing in life will sound a bit romantic, is love. And love is something you feel, and you put on people and on things. And if you put love on people and on things, you end up having a successful professional life and career. So that's the most important thing. Of course, learning is a great thing, and if you learn to enjoy learning, then you are happier. If you learn to enjoy teaching, it's also very nice. And if you learn to do good research, and that is what I think David meant, you also then can be very happy by discovering or by generating knowledge. But I think the key ingredient for all of this is love.
Okay, thank you. Maybe we can use this extract also to name the podcast episode, because I believe it's a very powerful message. Let's close with a traditional bet that I like to do in this podcast, because, and I mean, if we listened to this episode again 5 years from now, 10 years from now, what aspect of scientific research, maybe something we will still overlook or underestimate today, do you think will have changed the most?
That's a difficult
Yeah,
question.
maybe you can also try. Maybe 10 years is a long time. Maybe we can try to see what things are changing the most in 5 years.
Well, I think obviously there are two aspects that are closely related that will shape the future and that we are currently working on, all of us. And one is the emergence of the concept of precision psychiatry, the fact that we finally have biomarkers that are leading into new treatments for conditions such as Alzheimer's disease that are, in the frontier of neurology and psychiatry, and the fact that a similar paradigm will end up taking place in psychiatry. And of course, artificial intelligence and all the, of course, pros and cons of that will shape the future. And many of these things we are now doing sometimes might not look as they are as groundbreaking as they may be, just incremental knowledge, little things, but they are paving the pathway into those concepts that will become routine at some point. So I think many of the things that we've been doing over the years lead into that direction, to make psychiatry a branch of medicine where there is also objective ways to measure what we diagnose, what we treat, and to be successful. Even though by serendipity, by empirical knowledge, psychiatry is still a very successful specialty, more than many others in medicine. But with the use of neuroscience and precision psychiatry, I think we will, and maybe artificial intelligence, we will accelerate that progress into the next coming years. And many of the things we are doing now are just the first steps into that direction.
Okay, well, I will put a calendar note in my calendar to actually in 2030 to see if we were right or not. Okay, thank you so much, Edward, for this enriching discussion. I'm sure that our listeners will find many ideas that will guide their clinical and research work. Thank you.
Thank you to you, Michele, and it's been great.
Many thanks to all our listeners, and be sure to catch up future episodes of the ECNP podcast, where we share experiences from leading experts in neuroscience research. See you next time. Bye.
Bye.
Thanks for listening to this podcast from ECNP. The views and opinions expressed in this podcast are those of the interviewee and do not necessarily reflect the official position of ECNP. The content of this podcast should not be used in any way as the basis for treatment decisions.